My mother said it so calmly, you would have thought she was telling me the weather. Be happy for your sister, Tori. This gives Meredith a new start. I was standing in the middle of my office, one hand still on my desk, the other gripping my phone so tightly my fingers had started to ache. Around me, people kept typing, printers kept humming, someone laughed near the break room, and yet all I could hear was that one sentence repeating in my head. Be happy for your sister. 3 weeks earlier, my parents had sold the Portland house I grew up in for $1.8 million, the same house I had poured $200,000 into when I was 22. My grandmother's money. My future. My foundation. And now my mother was telling me every dollar of that sale was going to my older sister Meredith, because her marriage had fallen apart and she needed it more. I remember swallowing once, hard, trying to make sense of what she had just said. What about my share? I asked. There was a pause. Not a confused pause. Not even an apologetic one. Just the kind of pause people use when they think the answer should already be obvious. That was for the family, she said. You did the right thing back then. Don't ruin that now. That was the moment something inside me went still. Not loud, not dramatic, just still. Because when someone takes what is yours and then asks you to smile while they do it, you start to understand the shape of the love they've been offering you all along. If respect matters to you, subscribe. Stories like this are not about revenge. They're about the moment a person finally stops disappearing inside their own family. I didn't answer my mother right away. I couldn't. My throat felt tight, and behind that tightness was something older than anger. Recognition. Because this wasn't the first time Meredith had needed saving. And I wasn't just the sister. I was the one they always expected to pay for it. If you're listening tonight, tell me where you're listening from. I always wonder how many quiet daughters are hearing stories like this in silence. And to understand why I didn't hang up, why I didn't scream, and why my parents should have been much more careful before selling that house, I need to take you back to the summer of 2012 when I was still naive enough to believe that paperwork between family was just a formality. I was 22 that summer, and I still believed that being the good daughter meant things would balance out eventually. Back then, the house didn't look like something worth fighting over. It was just home. A slightly worn two-story in Portland with creaky stairs, outdated cabinets, and a backyard my dad never quite managed to fix. My parents talked about it like it was stable, dependable, something that would always be there. The way they talked about me, too. I had just graduated with an accounting degree. I had a job offer waiting. My life felt like it was finally starting in a straight line. And then my grandmother passed away. Eleanor Mitchell. She was the only person in my family who ever made me feel like I didn't have to earn my place. I used to visit her every Sunday during college, long afternoons of tea, stories, and quiet conversation that didn't require me to be useful to be loved. When her will was read, everything changed. She left me $200,000. Not shared, not divided, not for the family. Mine. I remember my mother's expression more clearly than anything else that day. Not grief. Not even surprise. Tension. Like something had shifted in a way she didn't approve of. She wasn't thinking clearly, my mom said later that evening, low enough that only I could hear. You know how she was toward the end. But my grandmother had been sharp, clear, intentional. She knew exactly what she was doing. And for the first time in my life, I had something that wasn't filtered through my family's expectations. For about 2 months, that money sat untouched in my account. I didn't rush to spend it. I didn't celebrate. I just held it there, like something fragile, like something that meant more than numbers. Because it did. It meant independence. It meant choice. It meant I didn't have to say yes every time someone in my family needed something. At least, that's what I thought. If you know what it's like to finally have something that feels like yours, only to feel that quiet pressure building around it, you already understand where this is going. 2 months later, my mother called me into the living room. She said she had an idea, an opportunity. And the way she said it, it sounded like I was about to do something that would make everyone proud. I didn't know yet that it would also cost me everything that money was meant to protect. I remember the way my mother smiled when I sat down. Not warm, not exactly. More like certain. Like the decision had already been made, and I was just there to agree to it. We've been thinking, she said, folding her hands in her lap, about how to turn your grandmother's gift into something meaningful for the whole family. The word gift landed differently than it had before. Not something given to me, something expected to be shared. My dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees, trying to sound practical. The house still has a mortgage, about $120,000 left, and it needs work. Roof, kitchen, some structural updates. I nodded slowly, not sure yet where this was going. If we pay it off, he continued, and invest a little more into renovations, the value will increase significantly. Real estate always does. Then my mom said it. If you contribute your $200,000, we can eliminate the debt, upgrade the house, and when we sell someday, you'll own 40%. 40%. She said it like it was generous. Like I was being invited into something smart, responsible, family-centered. It's an investment, my dad added. Not just help. I remember looking around that living room, the same walls I grew up with, the same couch, the same framed photos, and trying to feel safe inside that conversation. 40% of whatever it sells for? I asked. Yes, my mom said quickly. Of course. And that would be written down? I asked, more carefully this time. There was a pause. A small one, the kind that doesn't look like much unless you're paying attention. My mom let out a soft laugh. Tori, we're your parents. I know, I said. I just want it to be clear. For a second, I thought she might push back harder, but then she waved her hand like it was nothing. Fine, if that makes you feel better. That night I called my best friend Claire. She said, "What?" Claire asked, wide awake now. That it's an investment, 40% when the house sells. Get it in writing, she said immediately. I am, I replied. They agreed. Claire went quiet for a second, then softer. Tori, I'm not saying don't do it. Just don't be the only one remembering what this is. That line stayed with me longer than I expected. Because deep down I think I already knew something. Not that they were going to betray me, but that I might be the only one who would take this seriously. And somehow, that felt like enough of a warning. I just didn't listen to it. If you've ever convinced yourself something felt safe just because it was family, you know how quiet those warnings can be. The agreement was only one page. My dad typed it up that same night on his old desktop in the corner of the living room. I remember the soft clicking of the keyboard, the way he squinted at the screen like he was trying to make it look more official than it really was. It wasn't fancy. No legal language, no lawyer involved. Just clear sentences. My name, their names. The amount $200,000, the percentage 40%, and one simple condition. Repayment upon sale or transfer of the property. That should do it, my dad said, printing it out. My mom barely looked at it before signing. There, she said, sliding it across the table to me. Happy? I nodded, even though something about her tone didn't sit right. Not resistance exactly, just dismissal. Like the paper didn't matter. Like I didn't really matter for asking. Still, I signed. They signed. We dated it. August 15th, 2012. I remember holding that piece of paper for a moment longer than necessary, feeling a strange mix of relief and embarrassment. Relief because I had protected myself. Embarrassment because I had needed to. The next week, I wired the full $200,000. I watched the numbers leave my account in one clean transaction. It felt surreal. That money had never really felt like spending money to me. It felt like something I was supposed to build a life on. Now it was gone. Replaced by trust. And one sheet of paper. I put the original agreement into a safety deposit box the following day. I told myself it was just being responsible. Just good habits. But looking back now, I think part of me already understood something I couldn't say out loud yet. That sometimes, the only way to stay safe inside a family is to quietly prepare for the moment you won't be. Years passed. Life moved the way it does when you believe everything is more or less in place. I worked, got promoted, built routines, paid my own bills, stayed out of trouble, became exactly the kind of person families say they're proud of. Meanwhile, the house improved. New roof, updated kitchen, fresh paint. Repairs I helped pay for, sometimes directly, sometimes through those quiet, just this once, transfers my mom would ask for. Think of it as adding to your investment, she'd say. And I did. I never asked for updates, never brought up the agreement, never calculated what my share might grow into. Because I trusted them. Or maybe I just didn't want to find out what would happen if I didn't. Some of you listening already know this feeling when trust isn't loud. It's just something you don't question. Until one day, you have to. By the time I turned 30, helping my family had stopped feeling like a choice. It had become expected. Not in a dramatic way. No one ever said, "You have to." It was always softer than that. "Tori, can you help just this once?" That phrase showed up in different forms, different emergencies, different months, but it always landed the same way. And it was never just once. Meredith's car would break down. Her credit card would max out. There'd be a school expense for Emma, then later something medical for Jacob. Sometimes it was marriage counseling. Sometimes it was just a rough patch. And every time, my phone would ring. Not hers, my mother's. "You're the one who can handle this," she'd say gently. "Your sister is already overwhelmed." At first, I didn't think too much about it. I had a steady job. I was careful with money. I didn't have kids or a complicated life. Helping felt reasonable. Until it didn't. There was a Thanksgiving, I think it was 2018, when I casually mentioned the $15,000 I'd lent Meredith earlier that year. Just a sentence, not even a demand. "Hey, do you think we can talk about a repayment plan soon?" My mom pulled me aside almost immediately. "Don't be petty, Tori," she said quietly, her smile still fixed for the rest of the family. "Your sister is struggling." Petty. That word stayed with me longer than the money ever did, because it reframed everything. It wasn't that I had helped. It was that asking to be respected afterward was wrong. After that, I stopped bringing it up. Not just the $15,000. All of it. Over the years, the numbers blurred together: birthday checks, emergency transfers, things labeled loan that slowly turned into silence. At one point, I sat down and tried to calculate it. Rough estimate? Around $40,000. Gone. Not including the house. Not including the extra repairs I'd quietly contributed to. Just the cost of being the one who could handle it. If you've ever been labeled the strong one, you know how dangerous that can be. Because strong doesn't mean you don't need support. It just means people stop offering it. If you're still here with me, stay. Strength grows here. I didn't think of myself as resentful. Not yet. Just tired. Tired in a way I couldn't fully explain. Because nothing I had done was wrong. And somehow, that was exactly why it kept happening. I was doing everything right. And still losing something I couldn't name at the time. But I would soon. Because in my family, there was always a moment when everything reset. And Meredith was about to have another one. In January of 2024, Meredith's marriage ended. Not slowly, not quietly. It collapsed. Kevin left just like that. Walked out of the house they'd been living in for years and moved in with someone else. I didn't know the details, and honestly, I don't think it mattered. What mattered was what came after. Meredith packed up what she could, took the kids, and moved back into my parents' house. And just like that, everything shifted again. The conversations, the priorities, the tone. It all recentered around her. "She needs stability right now," my mom told me over the phone. "The kids need consistency. We just have to help her get back on her feet." I listened. Of course I did. Because those words weren't new. They were just louder now. More urgent, more justified. But something felt different this time. Not in what they were saying. In what they weren't. No one asked what this would mean for me. No one mentioned the house in terms of my investment. No one said, "Hey, let's sit down and talk about everything you've put into this." It was like my role had already been decided. Again. Support, adjust, understand. I went over one afternoon in early February. Meredith was in the kitchen, unpacking boxes, the kids running through the hallway like they'd lived there forever. She looked tired, but not uncertain. "I don't know what I would have done without Mom and Dad," she said, placing dishes into the cabinet like it was already hers. I stood there for a second, watching her move through that space. My space too. Or at least, a space I had helped build. "You'll figure it out," I said. "You always do." She smiled at that. Like it was a compliment, and maybe back then, I still meant it that way. But something in my chest felt tight. Because for the first time, I wasn't just watching the pattern. I was starting to see where it was going. If you've ever had that quiet realization, that moment when things haven't gone wrong yet, but you can already feel the direction, it's hard to explain. It's not panic. It's clarity. Trying to get your attention. And I think deep down I knew. Whatever was about to happen next, it wasn't going to include me the way it should. Not as an equal. Not as someone who had invested. Just as someone expected to understand. Again, the first time my mother mentioned selling the house, she said it like it was just another update. Casual. Practical. Almost overdue. It might be time, she told me one evening in late summer. The market is strong. We could get a really good price right now. I remember pausing, just slightly, because something in the way she said we felt off. We? I asked. What's the plan? She didn't answer directly. Well, Meredith needs a fresh start, you know that. And this would give her the chance to get a place of her own, something stable for the kids. There it was again. Not if the house sold. Not how the proceeds would be handled. Just who it was for. I waited for her to say it. To mention my share. To acknowledge the agreement. To bring me into the conversation like someone who actually had a stake in it. She didn't. Instead, she kept talking about school districts, down payments, what kind of house Meredith might be able to afford. Like I wasn't even part of the equation. And I wish I could say I immediately spoke up. I didn't. I told myself I was overthinking it. That of course they remembered. That of course we would discuss it properly when the time came. Because what kind of parents would forget something like that? What kind of parents would take $200,000 from their daughter and then act like it never existed? I pushed the thought away, just like I had done for years. Because sometimes denial doesn't look like lying to yourself. It looks like waiting. Waiting for people to do the right thing so you don't have to be the one who forces it. A few weeks later, my mom forwarded me the listing. Professional photos. Bright lighting. The house looked almost unrecognizable, clean, updated, valuable. It didn't look like the place I had grown up in. It looked like an asset. Price listed, $1.75 million. I stared at that number longer than I expected. Because suddenly, the math wasn't abstract anymore. 40% wasn't just a concept. It was real. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think about it clearly. Not greed. Not entitlement. Just acknowledgement. That I had built something here too. That I had a place in this story. If you're still listening, tell me honestly, have you ever waited for someone to do the right thing instead of asking for it? Because that's where I was. Waiting. Believing. Still, giving them the benefit of the doubt. Even as everything around me quietly suggested I shouldn't. The offer came in faster than I expected. Less than 2 weeks after the listing went live, my mom called me, her voice lighter than I'd heard it in months. "We got one," she said. "Full price. Actually, a little over." I closed my laptop slowly, already feeling something tighten in my chest. "How much?" I asked. $1.8 million, she said, almost laughing. "Can you believe it?" I could. The market had been strong. The upgrades made sense. The number itself wasn't shocking. What was shocking was everything that came after. She didn't pause. Didn't say, "We need to talk." Didn't say, "Let's figure out your portion." She just kept going. "We're moving quickly. The buyers are motivated. Closing is scheduled for October 20th. October 20th, 5 weeks away. I waited. I gave her space to circle back, to remember, to include me. But she didn't. Instead, she shifted into logistics, packing timelines, paperwork, Meredith starting to look at neighborhoods, how exciting it all was. Exciting. That word echoed in a way that didn't sit right. "Mom," I said finally, keeping my voice as even as I could. "We should probably sit down and go over everything before closing." There was a small pause. Then, "What do you mean?" Not confused. Just careful. "The house," I said. "My contribution. The agreement." Silence this time. Longer. Heavier. And then she sighed. Not like someone who had forgotten something important. Like someone who was being inconvenienced. "Tori," she said, softer now, but not kinder. "We don't need to complicate this." Complicate. That word landed exactly where it was meant to. "This is already a stressful time for your sister," she continued. "She's trying to rebuild her life. The last thing she needs is tension over money." I felt my fingers press into the edge of the desk. "I'm not creating tension," I said. "I'm asking to talk about something we agreed on." "That was years ago," she replied quickly. "And honestly, You've done very well for yourself since then. There it was. The shift. From agreement to justification. From commitment to comparison. You have a career, Tori. Stability. Meredith doesn't. This sale is about helping her get back on her feet. I didn't respond right away. Because I could hear it now, clearly. Not what she was saying. What she had already decided. My part in this story had been rewritten. Quietly. Conveniently. And without me. I'm still part of this, I said finally. Another pause. Then, almost gently, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. You were part of it. Past tense. That was the moment I understood. They hadn't forgotten. They had chosen. Chosen to move forward as if I didn't exist in the outcome. Chosen to rely on who I had always been. The understanding one. I didn't call her back after that. Not right away. Instead, I sat there in my apartment, the late afternoon light stretching across the floor, trying to understand how something that had once felt so clear could be rewritten so easily. You were part of it. The sentence kept replaying. Not angry, not loud, just final. Like a door closing quietly. That night I pulled out my laptop and opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Important documents. Inside it, everything was still there, organized, labeled, untouched. Bank statements, old emails, tax returns. And then, the scanned copy of the agreement. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. My name. Their names. $200,000. 40%. August 15th, 2012. It looked exactly the same as the day we signed it. Clear, simple, real. I ran my finger lightly across the screen, tracing the signatures. My dad's handwriting slightly uneven like it always was. My mom's sharp, controlled. They hadn't hesitated then. So why was I hesitating now? Because they were my family. That was the answer. And for most of my life, that answer had been enough to override everything else. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. If this had been anyone else, a business partner, a client, even a friend, there wouldn't have been a question. I would have addressed it immediately, directly, without apology. But this wasn't anyone else. This was the same voice that had raised me, the same people who had taught me what doing the right thing looked like. And somehow, I had learned that doing the right thing often meant doing it at my own expense. I picked up my phone and opened my messages. Scrolled to Claire. Paused. Then typed, "They're selling the house for 1.8, not including me." 3 dots appeared almost instantly. "What do you mean not including you?" I stared at the screen for a second before replying. They said my part was for the family, past tense. There was a longer pause this time. Then my phone rang. I answered on the first ring. "Tori," Claire said, her voice already tight, "please tell me you still have that agreement." I turned my laptop back toward me, the document still open. "I do." "Good," she said, without hesitation. "Then this isn't over." I swallowed, because something in the way she said it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like a line being drawn. "I don't know if I can do that," I admitted quietly. "Do what?" she asked. "Turn this into something bigger." There was a brief silence on the line. And then, softer now, "Tori, it's already something bigger." I didn't respond, because deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about whether I was willing to keep playing a role, or finally step out of it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Anger would have been easier. Anger moves. It pushes you towards something: action, confrontation, release. What I felt was heavier than that. It was the slow, quiet unraveling of something I had believed in for a very long time. Around 2:30 a.m., I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen. The apartment was silent, the kind of silence that makes your thoughts louder than they should be. I poured a glass of water and stood there, staring out at the empty street below. You were part of it. It didn't sound cruel anymore. It sounded practiced, like something that had been decided long before it was ever said out loud. And that's when it hit me. This hadn't just happened. This had been planned. Not in a dramatic, scheming way, but in the quiet, convenient way families sometimes rewrite things when it benefits them. They didn't forget the agreement. They just chose the version of the story where it didn't matter. I walked back to my room and opened the drawer where I kept the key to my safety deposit box. I hadn't touched it in years, but I knew exactly where it was. Some part of me had always known I might need it. The next morning, I went to the bank before work. The woman at the counter smiled politely as she checked my ID, then led me to the back. The room smelled faintly of metal and paper, secure, controlled, quiet. She handed me the small box, then left me alone. I sat down and opened it slowly. Inside, everything was exactly as I had left it. And there it was, the original agreement. Not a scan, not a copy. The real thing. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of it not physically, but emotionally. 12 years of trust folded into one sheet of paper. For a moment, I just looked at it. At the signatures. At the date. At the version of myself who had believed that writing something down would be enough to protect her. I thought about putting it back, closing the box, letting it stay there untouched, unquestioned, unchallenged. It would have been easier. It would have meant no conflict, no confrontation, no risk of losing whatever version of family I still had. But it also would have meant something else, that everything I had given meant nothing, that I had agreed to disappear. Again. I folded the paper carefully and placed it back into its sleeve. But this time, I didn't leave it there. I took it with me. That decision didn't feel powerful. It didn't feel brave. It just felt necessary. Like something that should have happened a long time ago. On my way out of the bank, I paused for a moment outside the door, the morning air cool against my face. And for the first time since my mother's call, I wasn't asking myself what they would think. I was asking something else. What happens if I finally stop making myself smaller just to keep the peace? If that question feels familiar to you, you're not alone. I didn't go straight to work after leaving the bank. Instead, I sat in my car with the envelope resting on the passenger seat, my hands still on the steering wheel, engine off. The city was already awake, people crossing streets, coffee cups in hand, moving through their routines like everything made sense. For a moment, I wished I could step back into that kind of normal. But something had shifted, and I couldn't unsee it anymore. I reached for my phone and scrolled to Claire again. My thumb hovered for a second before I pressed call. She picked up on the second ring. "You got it?" she asked. No greeting. "I have it," I said. There was a pause, then a quiet exhale on her end. "Okay, good. That's good." I looked down at the envelope. "It doesn't feel good," I admitted. "I know," she said gently. "It's not supposed to." We sat in silence for a few seconds. "I keep thinking," I continued, "if I do this, there's no going back." Claire didn't rush to respond. When she did, her voice was steady. "Tori, I need you to hear this clearly. You're not the one creating that line. They already crossed it." I closed my eyes, because that was the part I kept trying to avoid. The idea that this wasn't a decision I was making alone. It was a response to something that had already been done. "What if this destroys everything?" I asked. "What do you have right now?" she replied. I didn't answer. Because we both knew. A relationship where I was expected to give and not allowed to question. A version of family where my role was fixed and my value was conditional. "That's not something you're destroying," Claire said softly. "That's something you're finally seeing." I let that settle. Then I asked the question I'd been avoiding. "What do I actually do?" "Lawyer," she said immediately. "Today." The word landed heavier than I expected. Not because it was wrong, because it made everything real. "This isn't just a conversation anymore," I said. "It never was," Claire replied. I picked up the envelope again, sliding my fingers along the edge. "I feel like I'm about to make myself the villain," I said quietly. Claire didn't hesitate. "You're not the villain for refusing to be erased." That sentence stayed with me. Not loud, not dramatic, just grounding. We hung up a few minutes later and I finally started the car. Instead of turning toward the office, I opened my maps and typed in something I had never searched before. Real estate attorney. A list of names appeared. Reviews, locations, office hours. I scanned them without really seeing, then picked one that was close enough to get to that morning. Nathan Webb, downtown Portland, available at 11:30. I booked it before I could change my mind. As I pulled into traffic, the envelope sat beside me like a quiet reminder. This wasn't about proving anything. Not anymore. It was about whether I was willing to stand in the truth, even if it meant standing alone. Nathan Webb's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building overlooking the river. Everything about the space felt intentional. Clean lines, neutral tones, quiet confidence. Not intimidating, but not casual either. I checked in at the front desk, gave my name, and sat down in a waiting chair that faced the windows. From up there, the city looked calm, structured, like everything had its place. I wondered what it would feel like for my life to look that way. Miss Fairfax? I turned. Nathan Webb stood in the doorway mid-40s, composed, the kind of presence that didn't need to fill the room to be noticed. Come on in. His office was simple. Desk, 2 chairs, shelves lined with files and law books that actually looked used. No performance, just work. Tell me what's going on, he said once we sat down. I didn't rush. I took the envelope out, placed it on the desk, and slid it toward him. This, I said, is part of it. He opened it carefully, not flipping through like it was routine, but reading line by line. I watched his expression, trying to catch something. Doubt, hesitation, anything. There was none. Do you have proof of the transfer? He asked. I do, I said, already pulling up the bank record on my phone. He reviewed that next, compared dates, amounts. Then he leaned back slightly in his chair. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay. I waited. Miss Fairfax, he continued, calm and precise, this is a valid agreement. Something in my chest loosened, but only slightly. They told me it was just family paperwork, I said. He gave a small, almost sympathetic nod. People say that when it benefits them. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. So what does that mean? I asked. It means, he said, you have a legal claim to 40% of the property's value upon sale. 40% of $1.8 million, I started. Is $720,000, he finished. Hearing it out loud felt different. Not bigger. Just undeniable. And if they ignore it? I asked. They can't close the sale with an active ownership dispute, he said. Not legally. I looked down at my hands. So I would be stopping it. You would be asserting your rights, he corrected gently. That distinction mattered more than I expected. He leaned forward slightly. There are 2 ways to approach this, he continued. We can notify them ahead of time, open a negotiation, give them space to respond. And the other? We wait until closing. Present the documentation in that room. At that point, the transaction halts immediately until the dispute is resolved. I pictured it. My parents, Meredith, the buyers, all of it stopping because of me. That feels extreme, I said quietly. Nathan didn't react to the word. It feels direct, he said. I sat with that, because what I had been doing my entire life was anything but direct. They don't know I still have this, I said. He met my eyes. Then the question isn't whether you have a case, he said. You do. He paused. The question is whether you're ready for what happens when they find out you're not willing to disappear anymore. The room went quiet. Not tense. Just honest. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't thinking about whether I was right. I was thinking about whether I was ready. I didn't answer Nathan right away. Not because I didn't understand the question, but because I did. Completely. What happens if I wait until closing? I asked instead, my voice quieter than I intended. Nathan folded his hands lightly on the desk. If we notify the real estate company of a potential ownership claim, he said, they are legally obligated to disclose that to all parties involved before the transaction is completed. So the sale stops. It pauses, he corrected. No one signs anything until the issue is resolved. I nodded slowly, trying to picture it again. The room. The documents. My mother's face when she realized. They're going to be blindsided, I said. Nathan didn't soften that. Yes. The honesty didn't feel harsh. It felt steady. And if I tell them ahead of time? I asked. You give them time to respond, possibly hire counsel, possibly dispute the agreement, he said. It opens the door to delay, negotiation, or escalation before the sale date. Delay, negotiation, escalation. Words that sounded manageable on paper, but I knew my family. Delay meant pressure. Negotiation meant guilt. Escalation meant I would be expected to fold like I always had. They'll call me, I said, more to myself than to him. My mom will call. She'll explain it differently. Nathan watched me carefully. And will that change the agreement you're holding? No, but it might change me. That was the real risk. I don't trust myself to hold the line if they get to me first, I admitted. It was the most honest thing I had said all day. Nathan gave a small nod, like that answer made the situation clearer, not worse. Then timing matters, he said. Not just legally, personally. I exhaled slowly. Because for once, this wasn't about what was fair. It was about what I could actually follow through on. If we do this at closing, I said, what do I need to do? Show up, he said. With me, with your documentation. And say very little. That surprised me. I thought I'd have to argue it. No, he said calmly. That's my role. Your job is to stay grounded and let the evidence speak. Grounded. That word felt unfamiliar in this context. I was used to explaining myself, defending myself, making things easier for everyone else in the room. And if they try to turn it into something emotional, I asked. They will, he said plainly. No hesitation. No sugarcoating. And you don't engage with that, he continued. You stay with the facts, the agreement, the transfer, the terms. I looked down at the envelope again, now resting on his desk. It didn't look powerful. It didn't look like anything that could stop a $1.8 million sale. But it could. Because it wasn't just paper. It was proof. And proof doesn't need to raise its voice. When is the closing? Nathan asked. October 20th, I said. He nodded once. That gives us enough time. For what? To make sure, he said, that when you walk into that room, you're not walking in as the person they expect. I held his gaze. And who is that? The one who stays quiet, he said. The answer landed deeper than anything else we'd talked about. Because that was the role I knew how to play. The one who understood. The one who adjusted. The one who didn't make things harder than they needed to be. And for the first time in my life, I was being asked not to be her. Nathan moved quickly after that. By the time I left his office, he had already outlined the first step. Notify the real estate company that there was an undisclosed ownership claim tied to the property. Not my name. Not yet. Just the existence of the claim. It puts them on notice, he explained. From that point forward, they're legally obligated to address it before closing. I nodded, even though my chest felt tight. Because this was the point where things stopped being internal. This wasn't just something I was processing anymore. It was something that would reach them. That afternoon, while I was back at my desk trying and failing to focus on work, Nathan sent the letter. Simple, direct, professional. A claim exists. Documentation available. Requires resolution prior to closing. No emotion. No explanation. Just fact. I stared at the confirmation email longer than I should have, because somewhere, in another part of the city, that message was about to land. And when it did, everything would start to shift. My phone rang at 5:47 p.m. Mom. I watched it vibrate on my desk. Once. Twice. 3 times. I let it ring out. A few seconds later, a text came through. Call me. Urgent. I didn't. Not yet. I packed up slowly, more aware than usual of every small movement, closing my laptop, grabbing my bag, walking out of the office like it was any other day. It didn't feel like any other day. By the time I got home, there were 3 missed calls. Another text. Tori, something has come up with the sale. Do you know anything about this? I sat down on the edge of my bed, phone in hand. For a moment, I considered pretending I didn't. Pretending I was just as confused as they were. But that instinct, the one that always moved me towards smoothing things over, felt different now. Recognizable. And optional. I called her back. She answered immediately. Tori, what is going on? Her voice was tight, controlled. But underneath it I could hear it. Uncertainty. They said there's some kind of claim on the house, she continued. The agent is being very vague. Do you know anything about this? I took a breath. Yes, I said. Silence. Then, sharper now. What do you mean? Yes? I mean the claim is real. Another pause, longer this time, and then her voice changed. Not louder. Colder. Explain. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, but my voice stayed steady. It's about the agreement from 2012, I said. The $200,000. The 40%. No, she said immediately. No, that's not what this is. It is. That was years ago, Tori, she snapped. That was never meant to be. It was signed, I said, not raising my voice. By you and Dad. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was calculating. You went behind our backs? She asked finally. Behind? That word almost made me laugh. I protected myself, I said. You blindsided us, she shot back. Do you have any idea what you've done? I looked down at my hand, still holding the phone. Yes, I said quietly. For the first time, I do. She didn't respond right away. And in that silence, something shifted. Because for the first time in my life, she wasn't the only one in control of the narrative anymore. The guilt didn't come all at once. It came in waves. That night, after the call ended, I sat on my couch in the dark, replaying every word my mother had said. Not just what she meant, but how easily she had stepped into it. You blindsided us. Not we forgot. Not let's talk about this. Not even we made a mistake. Just accusation. As if I had broken something that had already been quietly taken apart. My phone buzzed again. A message this time. From Meredith. I heard there's an issue with the sale. Mom's really stressed. What's going on? I stared at the screen. There was no anger in her message. No urgency either. Just distance. Like she was asking about a delay in paperwork. Not something that had my name written all over it. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Stopped. Because I didn't know which version of the truth she had been living in. Or which one she had chosen. Instead, I set the phone down. 10 minutes later, it rang. Meredith. I let it ring once, then answered. Hey, she said, her voice softer than I expected. Can we talk? We are talking, I replied. A small pause. Mom said something about an agreement? She asked carefully. From a long time ago? Yes. Another pause. Was that real? She asked. The question landed deeper than it should have. Not because she didn't know, because she was asking like she hadn't needed to. Yes, I said. It was real. And you're using it now? She continued. I closed my eyes briefly. I'm honoring it, I said. Silence. Then a quiet exhale on her end. Tori, I didn't know it was that much, she admitted. Mom said you helped a little with the house back then. I thought it was just, something small. I didn't answer right away. Because I remembered the phone call I overheard. The way she had said it. That was a gift. Family helps family. You knew there was something, I said finally. You just didn't ask how much. She didn't deny it. I guess I didn't want to know, she said, her voice thinner now. That honesty surprised me. Not enough to fix anything, but enough to make it real. I needed this, Tori, she continued. You know what this year has been like for me. I do, I said, but that doesn't make it yours. The line went quiet again. He left me with nothing, she whispered. I swallowed. And you think the answer to that is taking what was left to me? That's not how I saw it, she said quickly. I thought. I know what you thought, I interrupted, gently but firmly. You thought I'd understand. That word sat between us, heavy, familiar. And you always do, she said, almost reflexively. There it was. Not just expectation, identity. I took a slow breath. Not this time. She didn't respond. And for the first time in our entire lives, I didn't rush to fill the silence. The next 2 days were quiet on the surface. No dramatic calls, no long messages. But underneath that silence, everything was moving. Nathan kept me updated. The real estate company has acknowledged the claim, he said during a short call the next morning. They've informed all parties that the closing cannot proceed without resolving it. All parties. That meant my parents, Meredith, the buyers, their lawyer. Everyone. They're asking for documentation, he added. You'll send it? I asked. Not yet, he said. We bring it to the closing. In person. I understood why. Not just strategically, emotionally. If my parents saw everything beforehand, they would have time. Time to call me. Time to explain. Time to shift the narrative back into something familiar, something that made me doubt myself again. This way, there was no space for that. Just truth. Presented where it had to be acknowledged. Still, the quiet didn't last. On the evening of October 18th, my mother called again. I answered. Tori, she said, her voice softer this time. Not cold, not sharp, careful. I think this has gotten out of hand. I didn't respond. I spoke with someone today, she continued. A lawyer. He said these things can be misinterpreted. There it was, a new angle. Not denial. Redefinition. The agreement is very clear, I said. Well, clarity depends on context, she replied quickly. You were young. We were helping you manage that money. It wasn't meant to be transactional. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Certainty. It was written as a transaction, I said. With terms. And signatures. She sighed, like I was missing something obvious. You're looking at this like a business deal, she said. But this is family. I let that sit for a second. Then answered quietly. It became a business deal when you decided to ignore it. Silence. A different kind this time. Less controlled. More uncertain. You're going to destroy this family over money? She asked. The question didn't land the way she intended, because for the first time, I could see it clearly. It wasn't destroyed when you made the decision? I asked. She didn't answer. And in that pause, something shifted again. Because this wasn't a conversation about convincing me anymore. It was a realization that I wasn't going to move. You don't understand what you're doing, she said finally, her voice tightening again. People are going to hear about this. They already have, I replied. Another pause. What does that mean? I sent the agreement to the family, I said. With the bank record. I hadn't planned to say it like that, but it was true. And once it was said, it felt steady. You what? She whispered. I'm not hiding this, I said. I'm not going to let this become a story where I'm the problem. The line went quiet. Completely. And, for the first time, it wasn't me sitting in that silence, wondering how to fix it. It was her, trying to figure out why she couldn't. By October 19th, the day before closing, everything had shifted into something that felt inevitable. Not dramatic. Not chaotic. Just set. Nathan asked me to come by his office one more time that afternoon. A final walkthrough. When I walked in, the conference table was already covered with documents neatly arranged, labeled, ready. The original agreement, certified copies, my bank transfer records. A timeline he had put together, outlining the sequence of events from 2012 to now. It looked clinical, organized, nothing like the emotional weight behind it. Walk me through tomorrow, I said, taking a seat. Nathan nodded. Closing is at 10 a.m., he began. All parties will be present: your parents, your sister, the buyers, their attorney, the escrow officer, and the real estate agent. I pictured it. The room. All of them sitting there, expecting a routine transaction. They've been informed there's a claim, he continued, but they don't know the details. Not yet. And we arrive. When? On time, he said. We don't rush. We don't surprise them early. We walk in like we belong there because you do. That mattered more than I expected. Because for most of my life, I had learned to enter rooms quietly. To adjust. To not take up more space than necessary. Tomorrow would be different. What happens once we're inside? I asked. I introduce myself, Nathan said. I present the documentation. I state your claim clearly and professionally. And then? The escrow officer pauses the transaction immediately. No one signs anything until the ownership issue is resolved. I nodded slowly. And my role? He looked at me directly. You stay calm, you don't argue, you don't defend, you don't get pulled into emotional conversations. I almost smiled at that. That might be the hardest part. I know, he said. That's why we're talking about it now. There was a brief silence. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind all day. What if they try to turn everyone against me in that room? Nathan didn't hesitate. They might, he said. But this isn't about perception. It's about documentation. I glanced down at the papers in front of us. Proof. Not opinions. Not family roles. Not expectations. Just facts. They'll say I'm doing this for money, I said quietly. They already believe that, he replied. What matters is whether you believe it. I sat with that. Because the truth was, I didn't feel greedy. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt tired of being erased. That's not why I'm doing this, I said. I know, Nathan said. And tomorrow, you don't have to explain it. The documents will do that for you. I exhaled slowly, because for the first time I wasn't preparing to argue. I was preparing to stand still. As I gathered my things to leave, Nathan added one last thing. They're expecting the version of you who keeps the peace, he said. I paused at the door. They're not getting her tomorrow. And for once, that didn't feel like a loss. October 20th. 9:45 a.m. Lakewood Realty's office looked exactly like you'd expect. Glass walls, polished floors, everything designed to make transactions feel smooth and effortless. I arrived with Nathan 15 minutes early. We didn't go straight into the main room. Instead, the receptionist led us to a smaller conference space across the hall, where we could wait without being seen. From where I sat, I had a clear view through the glass. One by one they arrived. My parents first. My mother looked composed, dressed like this was any other important day. My father stood beside her, adjusting his jacket, already looking slightly out of place. Then Meredith. She walked in with a kind of quiet excitement, talking as she sat down, her posture lighter than I'd seen in months, like something good was about to happen. Then the buyers. An older couple. Careful, observant. Their attorney followed, then the escrow officer. Everything in that room moved forward like it was supposed to. Like nothing was about to interrupt it. I sat very still. Hands folded in my lap, breathing steady. Nathan glanced at his watch. "Time," he said. I nodded once, and as we stood and walked toward that glass door, I realized something. This wasn't the moment I became someone different. It was the moment I stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't. The room went quiet the second we walked in, not completely silent, but enough. Enough for attention to shift. Enough for something to feel off. Meredith noticed me first. "Tori?" she said, confusion crossing her face. "What are you doing here?" My mother turned immediately. For a brief second, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Then tension. "I came because I'm part of this," I said. My voice didn't shake. Nathan stepped forward slightly. "Nathan Webb," he introduced calmly. "I represent Miss Tori Fairfax." The word represent landed heavier than anything else. My father frowned. "Attorney?" he said. "Why would you—" The real estate agent cleared her throat, her expression tight. "Before we begin," she said carefully, "there's a matter we need to address regarding an ownership claim on the property." My mother's posture stiffened. "That's already been explained," she said quickly. "There's no claim." Nathan didn't raise his voice. He simply placed the document on the table. "There is," he said. And just like that, everything stopped. No one spoke for a few seconds, not even the buyers. The document lay there between all of us, flat, ordinary, and impossible to ignore. My father was the first to reach for it. His hands moved slower than usual, like he already knew what he was about to see. He read the first line, then the second, and I watched the color drain from his face. "I remember this," he said quietly. My mother didn't touch it. "That doesn't mean anything," she said, sharper now. "It was never meant to be taken seriously." Nathan didn't react to her tone. "It meets all legal requirements," he said calmly. "Signed by both parties, clear terms, verifiable transfer. This is enforceable." The escrow officer shifted in his seat. "I'm going to need to pause the closing," he said carefully. "We can't proceed with an active ownership dispute." The word pause settled heavily into the room. The buyers exchanged a look. "This should have been disclosed," their attorney added, firm but controlled. My mother finally turned to me, not confused anymore, not even fully angry. Something closer to disbelief. "You would do this?" she asked. I held her gaze. "I didn't do anything," I said. "I just stopped pretending this didn't exist." No one interrupted, because the truth didn't need defending. It was already sitting there, in ink and signatures, in a room that couldn't ignore it anymore. And in that moment, I didn't feel powerful. I felt clear. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity, you already understand how quiet that moment can be. And if that kind of strength speaks to you, stay with us. Strength grows here.